Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Profit Minds podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch, creator of the Profit Minds Growth System, a unique blend of profit growth, productivity acceleration, and building robust business process for scale. In every episode, I interview entrepreneurs and small business owners from around the world with a unique story to tell. You can find the show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Hi, everyone. Today, my guest is Stephanie Craig, president of Kirch & Company. And today we'll be talking about why preparing for a crisis is your best business decision. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, Steve. I'm so thrilled to be with you and to be able to talk about something that I think is so crucial to growing a business.
Yeah, and just to let the listeners know, we had a bit of a crisis when we started this podcast because we had this unbelievable technical issue that it took us like 15 or 20 minutes to get it resolved. But we did, and we're here. So, Stephanie, I always start with asking my guests, how did you get to where you are? What is it that drove you? Tell me your story.
Well, I like to say that I come from a long line of people that run towards fire. My grandfather was at Normandy, and my father was a Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer. So there's the secret. I'm actually Canadian, and my brand of fire is actually proverbial. I really took my licks in politics. I have never been able to confirm this, but I may be the only person that's worked in both the House and the Senate in the US and Canada, which incidentally, both are on hills. So it all kind of dovetails together. I have a real love for the campaign world, which is very different than what you see on TV. It's just a series of problem solving. And throughout my life, I found out that I tend to be the person that is the most calm in the middle of a storm. I like to say my happy place is in the middle of chaos. And as I really built my career, I found myself in more and more circumstances where I was the person that people turned to when something was going wrong. Or as people like to say, I was the call I was on the other end of the phone at 3:00 in the morning. And I had started my own firm, and our founder, Bill Coletti, had come to me and said, would you want to come and take over Kirch? And I thought, Bill and I had worked together a decade before in a different company, and just the ability to magnify the talent that we had was just too good to pass up. So I shuttered my own doors and joined in with him. And it has been really interesting to see where we can take the business, and the chance to get to work with really great people doing more on the front end of crisis than the back end. We always like to say it's much cheaper to prepare than to respond. So that's been a really neat aspect of how we've taken Kirch in a new direction.
That's really great. And I love this topic because I've been a certified facilitator of the Covey 7 Habits for over 25 years. And of course, Covey is famous for I'll say, appropriated Eisenhower matrix, where he talks about, quadrants 1, 2, 3, and 4. And quadrant 1 is that quadrant of crisis or quadrant of emergency. And quadrant 2 is where you want to spend all your time. And the goal is to move from quadrant 1. And all those things that happen in quadrant 1 happen because you didn't spend enough time in quadrant 2. Or if you find yourself in a quadrant 1 crisis, you get through it, and then you figure out what it was that went wrong, so you can spend more time avoiding that the next time. So I'd love to hear about your perspective on preparing for a crisis and how that's really important in business, because I absolutely agree.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the quadrant, because that's a lot of how we kind of started our thinking on it. We look at crisis as a life cycle. And it starts with learning to be able to recognize what's going to come at you, because let's just be honest, most people can foresee what is going to come at their business. I think
Yes.
personal crisis, we really look at personal crisis and business crisis very differently. And business crisis, you can foresee what is coming at you if you are looking. So learn to recognize. And then once you recognize, you prepare. Your preparation allows you to mitigate. If you can't mitigate, it helps you navigate. And then once you've
Hmm.
navigated it, you can recover from it. And then you need to learn again. And so we really look at it as a crisis life cycle that is ever evolving. And the really, really high caliber organizations when it comes to crisis preparation are also very, very good at crisis response. And so that is it is not a chicken or the egg. I can firmly tell you that in this case, the egg comes first.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about these four different pieces, right? It's, you prepare,
Mhm.
and that allows you to, you said mitigate first, right?
So you
Um,
recognize, mitigate,
recognize, yeah,
navigate. And so
and
that
then
that
and then
is
learn. Yeah.
yeah, so the two kind of acute, we'll call them the acute part of the life cycle. It's mitigating and navigating because that's when it's happening.
Sure.
You are in, and I don't care who you are. Everybody has a crisis. Every business will
There
have
is
a
something
crisis
that's
at
going to
some
go wrong.
right. And it's interesting because we talk about the work we do as reputational crisis, but
Hmm.
everything is a reputation crisis. If you build widgets and you can't build widgets one day for one particular reason, that is a crisis to your supply chain. And so
Yep.
when we talk about the recognizing and the mitigating, one of the key parts of that is understanding what you value as an organization, what your organizational values are. And let's be very clear, if your organizational value is to make money, that's your organizational value. There's nothing wrong with that. But know what it is. And then the second thing is know who's important to you. I was having a conversation earlier today with someone who is in a very big financial services company, and they sat and thought about it for a second, and they thought, our most important stakeholder are our employees. Nothing works without our employees. So if our employees are not happy, we're nowhere. So when they think about how they are going to prepare for crisis, they have to figure out what matters to their most important stakeholder, what matters most to their employees. And for some organizations, it's going to be your employees. Some people, it's going to be your customers. Some people, it's your board. Some people, it's your investors. Some people, it is a specific group. Knowing who they are, knowing what they value, how they communicate, and where they are is critical to being able to prepare, mitigate. They can also be an early warning system for you as part of your recognizing.
Sure. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so so recognize and then mitigate,
Yeah.
uh, and then now I love this navigate, right? Because
Right.
again, you're always got there's going to be something that goes wrong.
Well,
And
we look at this.
even if you put together the perfect mitigation system, well, you can't, right? It's going to be something that's going to be a little bit of a twist on that that's going to force you to change course, to navigate.
Mhm.
I love
And
that
what we
imagery.
like to think about it as, we want to take your very, 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 very no good day and make it better. So the
Alexander,
organizations that are,
yes.
yes, the organizations that are good at this, navigating to use some even more dramatic imagery, when they're navigating their storm, the waves aren't as high. The
Right.
the
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 mitigation
turn
makes
isn't
the
flat.
waves lower.
Right.
Ah,
Right.
got it.
And
Again, I
it also
love
makes
that.
the navigation shorter. Your trip from one
Hmm.
place to the next is shorter, and you're into recovery. And it
Okay.
also makes the recovery easier. I had someone today say, "Hey, did you see that interview, with that CEO that he apologized?" And I thought if he'd done everything beforehand, he wouldn't have had to apologize
Why is that?
because they would have been able to do all of the thing. It was a stupid mistake, and what they did, um, was entirely preventable. They just didn't wanna see it. And that's another key component, I think, when the folks that are really thinking deeply in how to prepare and navigate and recover from a crisis is you have to be willing to recognize that it can happen.
You have to admit that you could be wrong.
Right. Or and fallible.
Yeah.
It's not even
Yeah.
just wrong that you're not 100% all the time. And that I find leads to a good number of crises, is that just people weren't willing to admit that they had made a mistake or that something had gone wrong.
Or that they weren't perfect in predicting the future.
Right.
Yeah, because that's I mean,
Absolutely.
that's gotta be a piece of it, right? You have to when you do, any sort of opportunity analysis or threat analysis, right? This reminds me to
Mhm.
some extent of the classic SWOT, right? The strengths,
Mhm.
weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And if you're not honest with what the threats are, then you cannot possibly prepare.
Well, and I think one of the things that I take most from politics is an ability to understand what motivates people and how they need to be
Mm,
approached. Because I usually, like I keep saying this, the people that are really doing this well, I find them in pieces of great excitement and optimism because they know that they're doing the right things to prepare them. The other times I'm finding people in probably their worst business moment. And if they're in the leadership spot, it's usually whether it was their fault or not, as the saying goes, the buck stops with them. So there's all kinds of emotions and reactions happening that really a large part of what we do when we are helping people respond is help them figure out how they can manage themselves.
yeah, that's the whole self-management thing is a whole nother topic. We could probably spend an
Absolutely.
entire episode talking about that. So somebody said once, and I don't remember who it was, but they said the difference between a crisis and an emergency is your level of preparation. Would you
Absolutely.
agree with that?
Absolutely. I just recently, so I live on the coast in Virginia,
Mm.
and Hurricane Lee may be the slowest hurricane that I've ever seen. But I woke up to, we were going to get a direct hit from this hurricane, and I hadn't prepared. I had all of these wonderful family heirlooms on the first floor of my house, and I just thought, gosh, I'm not ready. What's wrong with me? Like, I'm usually have all my water and, I figured, but it is the difference. It became a crisis. A hurricane's an emergency no matter how you slice it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and a level 5 coming at you is a real emergency. It's now down to a 2, and I am, praying for the people of Bermuda. But when you have not prepared, when your grandfather's, I mentioned my grandfather earlier, when his war medals are on the first floor along with all these other things, that's when it becomes a crisis because I hadn't done the preparation. I hadn't thought about what would I take, what would I try to move, what did I need to do if I couldn't get out. Life had been so
Yeah,
busy I didn't have the time to do it. And you're right, it's the difference between a crisis and an emergency.
that's great. Yeah. So, um, Unfortunately, we're going to have to cut this off pretty quickly here. I would love to spend more time, and maybe I can have you back again so we can
Oh,
delve
would love
into
to.
some of these, personality things and some of the additional challenges that you've seen and how you help people mitigate. But if somebody wants to get in touch with you to prepare for their next crisis, what's the best
Mhm.
way to reach out?
I am, an email person still to this day, so it's scraig, Craig, at kith, KITH, The co part is important. There's no M.
Ah, yes. So that's wonderful, and I will encourage people to do that. And that concludes our show. Thanks to my guest, Stephanie Craig, the president of Kith and Company. I hope you learned something about why preparing for a crisis is your best business decision. I know I did. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Profit Minds podcast. This is your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch. Please visit www.profitminds.net for other episodes or to contact me. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others. Thanks for listening. Have a grateful day.